First, please make sure to time yourself and also not take materials posited after exceeding 15 seconds. Second, if you have any POI conflicts with interpreters, please declare before uh, beginning your speech. Then just clarification. Government beats motion A and opposition beats motion B. Is this correct? Yes. Okay. So the motion will be ones about SBNR. Okay, so anything further to do? Like to call upon Prime Minister. Here.
Okay, no gender preference. If you have POI, please voice out, and I'll try my best to keep with you. I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, explaining why the increase of SBNR individuals is occurring. Secondly, to explain the counterfactual, like on-side opposition, what it's like without this rise of SBNR. And next, explaining why it is much better to be in an organized religion. Yeah, so firstly, why the increase is happening. We believe firstly there's like because of like trends or traditions. For example, in Japan we have like tradition where people go to like temples, or people believe in ghosts and so on, but they don't necessarily belong to a strict like organized religion. Their friends or family do these kinds of practices, and we believe people tend to follow. Secondly is that there's less like religious dominance. We believe that people seeing these organized religions being bad, such as like Toitsu Kyokai in Japan's case, where the believers are greatly financially exploited and deceived by these things, or like the Catholic Church discriminating against the LGBTQ and so on. The decrease in religious dominance is also false. And thirdly is that this is done in a global manner because this global trend is like occurring due to globalization. For example, due to the prevalence of like SNS, or like more people in different countries seeing the same kind of entertainment, such as like anime or movies and so on. There's like on SNS, there's criticism towards there's criticism by progressive movements towards conservative kinds of cultures or religions, and also like in the entertainment we can see like the mixture of cultures, such as in Japan, there's a lot of light novels or comics or mangas that focus on isekai tensei, in other words, like reincarnation and so on. We believe that this doesn't necessarily follow a certain strict religion, it's rather a mixture of things. This shows the popularity in such content is like a symbolization of this SNBR. So we say on-side opposition in the world where SBNR does not rise or does not exist, these individuals on the ground have to subscribe towards their own indigenous religion, or they have to find such kinds of religions. That being said, next I'd like to explain why SBNR is much better than to belong to a certain organized religion. We believe this is simply because organized religions have many harms to itself. Firstly, they likely to be very binding. They have like strict rules that are set by like their certain documents, such as the Quran or the Bible in the case of Christianity and so on. They likely have a hierarchical system where like the people on the top or the leaders know best about the religions, and the leaders are quite absolute. In that case, like individuals cannot voice out even though they are oppressed by the people because they might be scared that they cannot go to heaven and so on, as they are taught by these kinds of religions. As a result, there's a lot of like sexual abuse towards like minors, especially when the people at the top of the hierarchy have a lot of power and can like suppress investigations and so on. So people are suffering. Secondly, is that we believe that these religions don't necessarily make people happy, but rather make them unhappy, because we believe religions have great intentions or incentives to make their believers constantly feel dissatisfied so that they keep staying in the religion to wish that one day they would be saved, but that day would never come. Because these religions simply want the people to stay so that they keep giving them money, or they could keep staying in power due to the large number of believers. In like very malevolent cases, they might let their believers keep contributing large sums of money and telling them that unless they continue, they cannot go to heaven. Or in like more moderate cases, people who want to drink alcohol may feel really shamed by their Buddhist communities and so on. Thirdly, is that we believe such organized religions are likely to exclude certain individuals. For example, the LGBT and Christianity are seen as sinful as being like homosexual people, because like in the Bible, there's like a description that like says bad things about these homosexual people. We believe the reason they do this is A, they want like unique salvation by requiring demonization. People believe that they are good because they don't have these certain traits. Yeah, yes.
So the end purpose of joining religion is to be able to get into heaven. Don't you think, in order for religious organization to recruit more followers, have an incentive to say even minorities, LGBT people, can also get into heaven to expand their own community?
Yeah, we believe as long as these like religions can stay large in power, they don't necessarily have to be inclusive towards like minorities as well. So moving on, B, we believe that these like discriminated people exist because religions want a scapegoat where they blame, in case like some bad things happen towards the religions, they can put all the blame towards these like weak certain kinds of people, so that the people in top can stay in power and so on. We believe it is very harmful. Um, However, we believe that thanks to the increase of SBNR trend, people are likely to be saved because, firstly, as for people who do not have core beliefs and want like mental security or have this like moral direction in their life, on their side, they're likely to have to subscribe towards their indigenous close religion. However, on our side, thanks to the presence of SBNR and it being like present due to like the SNS and so on, people can simply take these kinds of like routes of being SBNR so that they like act well and still have that secureness that like God is looking at you and you go to heaven if you're a good person. Secondly, is that we believe this decreases the hurdle of staying in like very oppressive and malevolent religions, because people can find an alternative where by subscribing towards SBNR, which is like less strict and malevolent, they can still get this like mental sense of mental secureness and so on. And thirdly, even if they were able to get out, at least like on SNS, these SBNR people can like come together and maybe they have a sense of belonging. They may share common struggles, which in itself is very good, and they might share like ways to uh, take care of like their struggles. Happy to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thanks from our Prime Minister. Next call on Leader of Opposition. Here.
So start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So firstly, couple of limitation to the government first cases. I'm going to my first argument. Actually going to like how the global increase looks like. But secondly, going to my two arguments. So firstly, going to the couple of bottom. So they mainly talking about protection of the like the minority or especially. My firstly, my partner totally be pointed out as a religious organization, as their incentive, they are likely to focusing on protection of these kinds of people because their highest priority is sustaining their religion. I mean, like they will have so strong incentive to getting much more like supporter or follower in the first place, and also like these kind of minority people or suffer from common society. I mean, like they have the so good like basement or so good pull for those kind of religious organizations. That totally mean like they are likely to be focused on in the first place. But even if they never focused on, there are tons of the other cases, other choices to be other like ways to be protected for these kind of people. For example, yeah, like the minority LGBT community or etc. But compared to in our side of the house, the as we will tell you, as we will prove in the first argument, the like saving the poor people is inaccessible in their side of house uniquely. This is totally why we think our side is much more likely is uniquely saving the poor people, and we think in terms of uniqueness, our side should be prioritized simply because their side is argument does not involve. So going to like next we're going to about how the global increase looks like. It simply means like because of the global increase, this kind of the like the trend is all also going to like the developed country in urban area where the, like many kinds of like rich people or privileged person is existing in the first place. I mean like more and more rich people, more and more privileged person is likely to opt into their side like yeah this kind of spiritual thing and opt out from the religion, or at least the likelihood of opting into religion is less it totally be decreased in their side of us. So going to my first argument is about like protection of the poor people. So we will trying to prove you the why poor people is uniquely saved in our house. So two things to say. Firstly, why the religious organization has a unique incentive to protect the poor people. But secondly, what is the problem of the government paradigm? Finally, why the other side is uniquely why the protection of the poor people is essentially so important in this motion. So firstly, going on to why the religious organization has a unique incentive to save poor people. Firstly, uh, they have a so firstly they have a universal value that they need to protect the whole kinds of people, or they need to help the more and more people because of like like for example universal value, for example like protect you should love the neighborhood, or like zek zakat, you know that these kind of like these kind of teaching or value itself is totally teaching you that you need to protect you need to help the much more people, and need to if you save the much more people, you can be much more better off, you can get much more blessing, you can go to the heaven or etc. It totally incentivize you. It's just this kind of total universal value will encourage you and encourage all believer to do well, including the poor people in the first place. But second, so that means like they have so strong incentive to poor people who are suffer from the current lacking money or etc. But secondly, that religious organization want political power. It simply means like they have much more like they that totally means like they need a much more believer, simply because if they have a get much more viewer get much more believer, they simply like they have a much more like people who vote for like specific person or etc. It totally means like if they can get the much more believer, you have much more political power as a religious organization. Why? So what is the likely cases of our of the religious organization? It's simply they were focusing on the poor people, because the poor people the person there are many kinds of there are many numbers of poor people in the world. If so that if they were going to the poverty area and going to like saving these kind of people by for example the soup kitchen or etc. and giving them the food or like yeah the necessities of their life, those kind of people feel like these kind of religion is good, or like god this kind of god is good or belief is good. By doing so, like the poor people are likely to opt into this kind of religion group simply because of that. These kind of people are going to this kind of religious organization are likely to go into the poor area poverty area and likely to get the much more believer from the property pool. It totally mean like they have so strong incentive to saving the poor people. So what is the problem? Why their side of the house like those kind of the incentive disappear? Why these kinds of thing is is difficult in their side of the house, and why this kind of like the protection is poor people's protection or saving is difficult in their side of the house. It is simply because in their side of the house, they will totally these organization will lose the donation from the rich people. As I told you in my like the characterization on the how the global increase looks like. No, thank you. This kind of like area, the rich people are more likely to opt into these spiritual things. I.e., these kinds of people never believe in opt into the opt into like this kind of religious organization, I mean like this kind of like in our side of the house, these kind of rich people how likely to opt into religious groups and donate because they think if I donate for this religious organization, I might be safer, etc. But in their side of the house, these kind of the people disappear in the religious organization, and this kind of donation will decrease and disappear in the first place. What is the problem over here? Like as assumption, these kind of religious organizations need money simply for like the generating the fixed cost or like the community services or like yeah, sustaining your flow, etc. It totally needs a so huge cost in the first place, so that and this is the highest priority for you. This is totally why you cannot you have no capacity for spending for the poor people or like soup kitchen or etc. Uniquely in their side of the house. This is totally why in their side of the house, this kind of money disappear and like number of the poor people who are saved by this kind of religious organization will decrease. Yes, take your point.
Yes, even on our side, the idea that poor should be helped because they are structurally deprived exists. The rich people or the general people are likely to fund and donate towards NPOs that are more reliable than religious groups when there are malevolent religious groups. What do you think about?
So talking impact about this point. So firstly talking about why this is important to protect the poor people. Why to protect the poor people? Why the religious organization is important is simply like the other kind of alternatives is never workable. The first is talking about like the government as a political party or etc. But second talking about like the yeah. Second, we're talking about the secular charity organization, including like the like other points from the government like NGO or etc. So first, we're talking about the like government or political party. These kinds of people have less capacity simply because firstly, these kind of like the political party or like government has no incentive to cater to poor people because they are likely to focusing on rich people or those kind of lobbying or etc. It means like totally the poor people have no incentive to go voting because simply because of that political party and government candidate have no incentive to focusing on poor people. That means like these kind of like organization will never protect people. As a second alternative, like which might come from government side, like the secure charity organism. I These kinds of people first spending so huge money on the advertisement or etc. to gaining much more supporter. It's comparatively like religious organization has a pool of believer that these kinds of people can easily opt into like donation or etc. It's totally means there's no need for advertisement. This totally why like our site has much more capacity outside poor people. Totally why we need to propose a motion. I'll pose a motion. Thank you.
Thanks for leader of mission. Next call from GBM. Here.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, just to tackle their case about religions, about to prove how our religions are going to continue to be radical and exploitative. They said that religions want more believers. I'm going to prove why religions are more likely to prioritize their doctrines than followers. The general mechanism here is that, like, if they promote like the incorrect version of their religion or like doctrines, they feel like it might lead to these like people going to hell in the eye of that religion. We think that intuitively it's probably like harmful for the leaders to believe that. But there are 3 mechanisms why, and the weighing of why they prioritize doctrines even more than followers. First of all, empirically, we think that we see Judaism or Catholic Church, if they cared more about followers, then we think that they would have taken more like popular tactics, such as included all the LGBT people. They would have said that capitalism is good, etc. And because all of these things aren't happening, we already see why they prioritize doctrine. But second of all, why the church even cares about its existence in the first place is because the church exists to be able to transfer like the pure version of this doctrine for more people to like believe in this like pure doctrine. So it's unlikely that they're going to dilute like the purity of that in order to get more people. We think, third of all, a third mechanism is in terms of certainty or proximity. We think that it's very speculative whether or not like changing the doctrine to be palatable to the majority will actually lead to more followers. It is likely not to, simply because religion can only appeal to those who are like unhappy in the society, who lack material benefit and hence seek spiritual salvation. And therefore, we think that in terms of cost benefit calculus, they're more likely to prioritize that like mental feeling that that doctrine that they're promoting is something that's very different. And that's why we don't think that religions are going to change to be more accepting. But rather, note that SBNR is likely to increase the quality of organized religion on our side, because now the religion has a meaningful competition. They see how people are being drained by this global influence. Now they are like, now that tips their cost benefit calculus to say, okay, maybe now they have to change the quality so more people aren't going to be drained there. And therefore, we also increase the quality of organized religion. Second thing I'm going to do is to prove why SBNR in general is beneficial. First of all, we think that individuals in the SBNR can choose the beneficial aspects of like spirituality to opt into. These people might not see the value in buying pots or like paying to build churches or temples, but you see the benefit in having like a higher being to be able to talk to when you are in your worst days, or being able to pray for something that you feel is uncontrollable. We think that that is a benefit that individuals can choose. This is especially beneficial for those who are excluded by certain religions, like the Dalits in like Hinduism, which are at the bottom of the caste system, which receives like extreme discrimination, or the LGBT individuals in the Christianity. We think that they have a viable alternative that they can choose, which they can like choose like pick and choose like parts that they feel are beneficial to them. They are not constantly criticized by a higher being saying that you're not committed enough, or just the fact that your identity is this way is already a sin. And therefore, we think that SBNR is largely beneficial. I'm going to give 3 mechanisms why the global influence in and of itself is better. First of all, you are likely to have more information from SBNR individuals, which means we think that these individuals, the background of them are likely to support those that want to be like freed from this like organized religion. They want to support those that come from like a similar background. So for example, the type of like information that they might pose is that like, if you are receiving such treatment in such like the church, etc., that is something bad, you have a viable alternative. Or for example, they're going to say, if you don't want to go to Sunday church, this might be a way to like make an excuse so that you can like compromise within that religion. We think that this is very like beneficial for individuals that on the counterfactual or simply trapped in these religions. They don't have any other source of information to help them get out. But second of all, we think that in general, there's likely to be less stigmatization against holding a spiritual belief. When we see right now how some religions are being like demonized, etc., you might feel ashamed to say that you have like specific spiritual belief. We think that the opt-in is likely to be more easier on our side when there's more people who you see that have like this tradition, or on a day-to-day basis you see in the conversations that they say that if you do that act you might like receive karma, etc., and you are able to understand like that belief and opt into that belief. We think that that's beneficial. But third of all, we think that there's likely to be a community of SBNR. This is a community that can replace like organized religion, because there's a variety of individuals in there. It's also unlikely to be binding, because every person inside that has a different varying degrees of like spirituality. When there's no like one holy book, when there's no one leader that tells people what is completely right, you feel that like whatever you believe in, you are still going to be like accepted inside that religion. And just that fact is already like massive benefit for many individuals that are forced to suffer in the organized religion on the counterfactual. Finally, in terms of saving poor people, we have many alternatives. We have welfare that's given by the government. We have NGOs. I'm going to prove why this is better. There are 2 mechanisms why. First of all, religion only protects those that are committed to this religion or are willing to get into this religions, because they see those people that are not inside as sinful. They feel that these people deserve to go to hell. Sure.
I mean, governments paying on welfare exists on both sides. Isn't it just much better?
Okay.
Significantly more funding.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. When like this funding that would have gone to religion and to these individuals are rather gone to the government, we think that they're rather able to like distribute it to like a larger place. But second of all, note that these funds by religion are likely to be conditioned upon like conversion. That's how we already explained how like religions benefit off of the suffering of individual. We think that they rather decrease incentive of governments or NGOs to get into these places when there's a resource trade-off and they see that religions are already like doing something good there, when like poor people don't revolt because they have this like fake sense of salvation that derives from this like suffering. These governments lack like the incentive to actually go and give funding or give like welfare to these individuals. Therefore, we think that we are likely to have a better form of like help to these individuals that are not conditioned upon like an exploitative religion exploiting that, and therefore I'm proud to propose.
Okay, so remark DPM, next one Pandilo. Yeah.
The coercive and abusive religion that government wants to paint the picture of might have been true in the 1960s, but it's no longer true in the context of today. Pope allowed women and queer communities to be part of the Catholic Church very recently. Black liberation theology, queer liberation theology is increasingly becoming a popular way in which we can reinterpret the religious text. Catholic Church reform has happened precisely after the sexual assault and corruption scandal of the Catholic Church because media investigation took place. Reinterpretation done and spearheaded by Islamic feminists actively empowered minority on the ground. We think that the trend of religious organization right now, which will continue on our side, is to liberalize and is to be very less and less strict. Why do we think this is the case? And let's respond to this from them. I think the reason why from government we get like two main reasons why religion is just very coercive. One is that doctrines, and I think there's a implicit assumption that doctrines don't change over time, but I think doctrines are very flexible and is easily going to change. I think empirically we know this when there's lots of different ways in which we can interpret the religious text, like Bible and Islam and Quran Islam as well. But I would also point out that because religious text is like very thick in this sort of lots of clauses, there's lots of contradictions that you can point out and interpret and justify in your behalf. But I would also point out that nowhere in the Bible does it explicitly say that homosexuality is a sin. It's just a recent, like the modern interpretation that can be changed relatively over time. The next claim, and the more convincing claim from DPM, is that, well, because, spiritualism is going to be a competitor, you have a competitive incentive. But this assumes that on our side, religion faces zero competition. In fact, it's not the case. Within religion, there are different theological doctrine and theological groups that exist. And these, all of these theological groups and different interpretation methodologies are competing against each other, which means the competition does exist to some extent on our side of the house. And I think the next point of response, I think, is a devastating thing. Like, I think that government team throughout this debate focuses on bad aspects of religion. I will talk about the good aspect of religion later on. I already mitigated the bad aspects, but here's the kicker. I think that the minority would be significantly worse off on their side of the house because the most vulnerable that I think among religion is the minority in the conservative rural religious area. And note the key framing we told you from the ELO, which is that the global increase in the spiritualism is primarily happening in urban area among the relatively privileged people who are able to afford to opt out of religion. But if you are born in a conservative Alabama, you're not able to opt out of religion. And that's very important because these rich people and liberal people in urban area are the ones that have been pushing for liberal reinterpretation of religious texts historically, and it continues going to in the future, which means on their side of the house, when these people opt out of religion, there is no encouragement or forces that pushes religion to liberalize its doctrine on their side of the house, which means, and I think the weighing is clear, queer people are obviously important, minorities matter, but minority within urban area are less important because they're more privileged compared to minorities within the rural areas who are the most vulnerable in this debate. The next thing I want to talk about is what happens to poverty elimination. And the POI that we get from them is that, it's symmetric, there are lots of alternatives. There are three reasons why uniquely we get distinctions. One is that we institutionally encourage followers to donate more money. Because every Sunday you go to church, you're being encouraged by the pastors to donate money. That is very distinct from just you knowing that donating to UNICEF in the abstract is very important. That's like institutionally encouraging more and more. But secondly, we provide stronger personal incentive for you to donate money, because if you do donate money, it means you're going to increase the probability of getting into heaven, which is a strong incentive for you to donate. But finally, secular organizations like UNICEF is just deeply inefficient and deeply inefficient. And the reason for this is that first they need to use substantial amount of their revenue onto advertisement campaigns, right? To get people's attention in the first instance. But religious charities don't have to do this because people would turn and show up on Sunday school, and then you can convince them there, right? Which means that it's not advertisement costs necessary for these religious charities. Religious charities consist of a majority of charities and giving in the world, and we get unique access to that. Like the final like sneaky response from DPM is like, oh, government welfare come at the trade-off, but this is a heavily undercooked argument. I really think it stands in this debate. Let's talk about good aspects of religion that the proposition by and large neglects. The first thing is, I think religion gives us a unique meaning and sense of purpose in life. There are two things. One is that most people live under insecurities. People live mundane lives and struggle a lot to find validation and meaning in life. That a lot of the times we feel that we're not special enough, we're not talented enough, we're just a tiny being in the universe, and we oftentimes lose a sense of meaning. But precisely because religion institutionally, persuades people that there's this God, and then God is watching over you, God is siding with you. That is an incredibly encouraging statement of the world. But secondly, in the most traumatic struggles that you go through, in your life, for instance, losing your loved one, religion is a unique support structure that you cannot have access to through spirituality. When your husband died, a lot of religious organizations will tell you that, well, he's in heaven, don't worry, you can try to move on. But this is an incredibly emotionally comforting experience for you. And this is something that we uniquely have access to. Because on their side, even if you believe in the supernatural being, the thing is that there is no institution or authority telling you how to guide through that spiritual path. I.e., you just try your own way, right? Like, my mom is very spiritual, but the way that she tries to find spiritual path is vis-a-vis like some random articles and blogs. But these are not really convincing. These don't have authority. So when you are going through enormous amount of struggle, the worst moment of your life, the most convincing way in which you can get the emotional healing is vis-a-vis religious authority that is incredibly convincing and powerful. PY.
Okay, you said UNICEF and NGOs have sacrificed costs, but we believe at least there's more scrutiny so that like social pressure to make
The debate is about comparative. We get more donation on our side of the house. We win. All right. Finally, on community, we think that religion uniquely gives a community responding to DPM. I think like there's no reason given by the side as to why like spiritual people would just unite and form a community. Like empirically, we know this in Japan. Like there's no spiritual community inside Japan. I don't think it is going to be reasonable to claim that there's going to be a large spike of community that replaces religious community. We think religious community uniquely provides two benefits. One is the social interaction. That when you are living in urban area, you oftentimes live alone. You don't have any community. You know no one inside your building, for instance. It's just very sad experience. But uniquely, we can make friends on Sunday school. We can interact with your neighbors and talk to people and feel like you're being part of the community. That is incredibly encouraging to you. But secondly, I would point out that it is a unique support structure for you. Neighbors looking after you. Often when you get addicted to, for instance, gambling, a lot of the neighbors are willing to give you job. A lot of the religious need type communities are willing to listen to your concerns when you are having problem with your marriage, for instance. These are incredibly important support structure that we uniquely have access to. At the end of this debate, to finally do a weighing, I think the poor people are the most important consideration in the debate, and the psychological benefits to this religious individual is heavily uncertain and speculative, and that's why we debate.
Next remark below. Next comment comment.
Okay, POI, please don't vocalize, and then we start. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, three things. The direct response to the dialogue. Second is when the cell is one. I like to touch with charity. The first is I like to have the five things they feel in the dialogue speech. First thing they tell us new kind of response arguments about hey people get the interpretation of religion. Someone who love us people can consult with religious doctrine and kind of thing. Two responses. First, you can even in Author's Hub, you can customize the interpretation your loved one's death. You can customize the consultant with something which is benefit to you. Which means in Author's Hub, what we can telling from the beginning of the speech is not religion, but on YouTube or Immigrant, people can tell, hey, how to interpret your dogs and then mothers and deaths, which means in Author's Hub, which is far better. The secondly, I think the claim from the Yoshipan is largely lack the premises of this premise of an analysis. Why the local authority can match the best interest to you. In Author's Hub, you can customize and what you want to what the identity interpretation you want to subscribe. But in the other how, because the birth lottery, you have to follow the interpretation which is authority given. So even in the cases of the religious giving the meaning of your life, it is true. I think this is much worse in comparing other how. Second thing I want to refute about their stance. Hey, popes in the religion recently liberalized, so it is changing the stance kind of thing. I think not why the change they are current existing religion changes the stance because thanks to the thanks to the SBNR. Why is the case? Because in because the people believe in the religious spiritual idea on the superficial idea, but the people believe in the core the out of date culture, which means the existence of people outside SBNR can lead to the people more incentive. Religious leaders get more a new incentive to changing the stance. Therefore, I think the claim about hey, religion is liberalized in itself is really is not something body to begin with because of this benefit we proposing it can exist because SBNL. The first thing I love to refute is that people religion so clean exists, the compete exists. I think this is response is at mitigating. The fourth thing I want to refute is about hey, the NPO the UNICEF is you have to advertise and you have to do financial resources to appealing their supporting. The two their responses. First, it is not that costly because oftentimes the social tech things like Google and Facebook and make it free for the NGO and NPO to creating the other ads about the donation. Second, even if it is costly, I think this is religious also needs something advertising fee because as they claim, they have to get a new people who join the other religion. Which means you have to use the social media, TV show, and the books to appealing why the religious is helpful for people on the ground. Which means at the point of cost, it's much more it's down to the opposition. Second person speech, Wayne. Why are they claim about the protecting the people who are unmatched with the religious identity in the local community? In itself is much more important compared to their claim. For two-layer analysis, that two reasons. First is the degree of agency we have. Second, existence of alternative. The first degree of agency. What we can protect is people who are unmatched with local agents. Things like because SNS can tell us the tips for to advise your tips to convince your parents. For example, tattoo or in the peers is prohibited in oftentimes prohibited culture, but because SBNL people get to think things tips to doing the alternative thing. But in the other hand, just their claim about the poor people can subscribe to the to the religious charity. So, but I think the agency is limited. But because the people you don't have to be gay to get this. You get some kind of benefit. But in other law, at least we can as minimal agency is protected in other law. Second is existence alternative. But in other law, what we can protect the people who in the much with you should people social media telling that hey you should not kick the tomb or you should not throw the eggs to the obosan, but I think that this is you can ignore the disrespectful out-of-date culture. So they because of this narrative from the SBN exists, people can come mentally survey or overall. But in the other how the people even if the homeless people exist, and on sleeping on the street. The fact that homeless people on the street, every cell can increase the local agent, local prime minister, to get new incentive to take care of it. This is like but in just how so they have alternative, but we can don't have that alternative to stop the people on the ground. Last part of my speech, I like to touch about charity, which is the main argument from the opposition side of the house. The two things, two response to it. The first is that the way even the charity exists, the way that people donate in of itself is bad thing. The second is it can kill the local government incentive to take care of the poor LPOI.
So the context of religious organization from God is like one where the religious organizations are so abusive and coercive. Why would people then be able to opt out of religion on your side? This seems to be not the main context in the debate.
Because they don't have the SBNR. Then first is that they score the way they score the way they donate for solving the poor in of itself is really bad. Even if the charity exists firstly, because you don't have the agency and you have to choose alternative. So because there are other agency we can refuse the poor. Yes, the charity or soup or the saving can exist. The implication of this, the lack of the accountability of the religion, hey, you are gay. As a gay, you cannot get into the church. Hey, you are an immigrant from Islamic state. You cannot refuse the soup from made of the pig's bones kind of thing. I think this kind of the ways they serving the poor people in of itself is bad, can like to be bad. Second, they like it to be killing the local government incentive. In just how people think and the local border and local people doesn't much incentive to take care politically because they think, hey, this is a religious kind of religious award to help poor, which means in just how a local community, the local governor are less incentive to prioritizing the poor, helping the policy. I think this is inherently less is important because they said, hey, a local community and the lack of the government budget is symmetric. I think this is not symmetric because it can surely decrease in just how. Happy to oppose that. Propose.
Thanks for more coming with. Next, close my opposition with.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Government states rely on only characterization of abusive, coercive religious organization, but it's not true. In addition, we prove that two or more arguments like religious help poor people and religious make the emotional fulfillment, and therefore we won this debate. And firstly, the few layman of this debate, and they say that minority are excluded, kyokai, church exploit poor people, but it's not the majority of church are not so much radicalized, mainly are liberalized, as my partner already told you. Why this is case is firstly my partner already told you because of the media coverage, because of the liberalization in global, and also yes, meteorology journalism, and secondly, I add in the reason like the church have the social obligation and moral obligation to set the check and balance system or some kind of system to it is because the social obligation and moral obligation and because they want in addition because they want the social reputation because they have more belief they are more liberalized and such terrible things are really happen in this world and even if such religious organizations are exist it's not the debate what is that because uh ah because as the people who got harmed is I clarify the victim by this bad terrible organization. Such people are very this such people uh such people may be in conservative area. What is because such because they it means they cannot opt out such organization and they cannot have narrative and such the minor and therefore in this case minority cannot opt out anyway minority cannot opt out anyway and and in 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 this conservative area such because however you in your world the increase of such believing exist in conservative area narrative won't convey it to such people because there are social pressure surroundings or information asymmetry or something like that and uh and next capitalization that that is he who is victim of this terrible organization is the desperate people in desperate they are irrationally opting such maybe such organization but even if your side such irrational desperate people do not be saved but do not be saved and but in our side mm, because our next move on to the the few rebuttals to that side the government told us that they uh they can they absolutely can reach the tipping point to change the religion and more people are going to drink or something like that but what I'm not sure why people suddenly start drinking or break the taboo of the religious belief people who desperately want to really want to break religious taboo they already do like the religious belief are not always coherent in your life muslim only drink so I don't know how there is exists in that argument and and in addition like the stigmatization decrease but but they not in but in the status quo I think such because of because such people don't show other people how they talk to the small people or some fairy so I think there's not there that and the which side are truly say mentally when you're desperate situation, i.e. loss of husband who 15 belonged with you. And government can solve that problem because less accessible because the SM subsidiary do not provide the specific content, specific fits you content. You have to create the solution or in our own way. But in our paradigm, you can go to the chat and the people treats you and since the 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 consultant, the religious consultant is human, so he can consult you according to your worries. They are competent to convince you. Three reasons. They can have experience, knowledge, and authority. Quality purpose.
Thanks for the bar competition lit. Next topic on the competition of client and now competition bench. Hey.
Being poor is extremely devastating. Knowing you might not be able to provide food for your kids, thinking that your life is doomed to fail. Feeling hungry all the time is just an incredibly traumatizing experience. The soup kitchen that the religious charity provides is a unique life-saving grace for these people. Now, being born as minority in religious community is suddenly a tragedy, but I think that compare this to the impact of being born under poverty. And I think that there are a variety of mechanisms by which you can try to mitigate the influence of coercive religion. For instance, form online queer groups, or for instance, being closeted. For instance, move to urban area for the job to escape from the coercive religious structure. I think that this is obviously not a perfect solution, but I think one that I think is less important compared to reduction of poverty overall. So I'm going to talk about three things in this page. Firstly, on poverty. Secondly, on is this good for generally majority people? And finally, I'll talk about religious minority within religion. Firstly, on poverty. We explained from the first speaker lots of mechanisms by which religion uniquely provides poverty alleviation programs, to which we get not much of a response. Let me highlight what we talked about. One is we explained that the religious organizations often have universal moral values and espouses these things, like love thy neighbor, the notion of zakat, and the notion of giving in general, that encourages followers to consistently do good. But secondly, we also explained that the incentive to proselytize for religious organizations means that they more likely go into poor areas and underprivileged areas where they can, assume higher rate of proselytization, which means that the soup kitchen or sending food packages and these things are uniquely going to be accessible on our side of the house. There are lots of mitigation attempts from their side, but I think a large portion of things like government funding, for instance, is just like literally symmetric on their side of the house too. And the analysis that government funding is going to be crowded is absolutely asserted without any reasons why this is the case. I just want to point out that a lot of the unique reasons we gave you, comparative reasons, gets no response from their side of the house. I think this is the clear material that is definitive win for our side, and given per away, I think we already won the debate. But let's then talk about, I guess, religious individuals, right? And the first thing I would point out, as I pointed out in POI, is that the entire government case is contingent on this characterization of religion that is just incredibly coercive and abusive. But the context of this debate is like global increase, right? As in, people are able to escape from religion. We're talking about these contexts of relatively liberalized religion in urban areas where people have the option to be able to opt out, and whether people should opt out en masse or people should not opt out and stay in that organization. Obviously, that is not the context. But I would also point out additional things. Prop never really defends the comparative on their side, which is a world where people believe in spirituality. Like, there's no defense of this. It's just like, really, ridiculous, right? We explain that if you believe in spirituality, you live a pretty bad life. Most people live under insecurity. They feel like they're not good enough. They're not special enough. They're not talented enough. And most people face traumatizing experiences like losing your loved one or failing really massively at, achieving your dream, for instance. And I think the government was like, you get to make up your own spiritual belief. But there's no single reason why you can't. it's very difficult for you to provide your own guidance of spiritual path. And that's really important, because to have the certainty that you're going to get into heaven, to have the certainty that you're going to be all right even after the traumatizing event, coming up all these ideas about yourself is something that's not possible. That's why we need the authority and religious organization that have the perceived like authority and correctness to tell you that you're all right. And that is the unique emotional comfort that you're able to advocate. Obviously, this is arbitrary, but we're fine because you get pragmatic benefits. The final thing is whether or not minority, right? And I think that to some extent we are willing to bite the bullet off, but I think we significantly mitigated the impact when we explained that the religious reform is consistently happening. And given that, by the way, this is the prospective debate, as in this is the debate, when these guys talk about, how, Pope allowing women to be a part of religious Catholic churches because of this competition mechanism, like that doesn't make sense from the rules debating, because we're debating about what is going to happen in the future. So all the status quo examples that I talked about is an example that falls for our side of the house. Don't let they, be fooled by the causality stuff. For these reasons, I think we clearly won the debate.
Thanks for your position reply. Finally, we call upon government reply to end off this debate.
Three, two, one. We don't think that it is justified to exploit believers to save the poor. They are not at all culpable for this happening, for their suffering. If they are forced to pay money when they're tricked to think that this is the only way you get salvation, we think that is equally as bad. We are able to weigh this by the lack of alternatives. We think the poor can still be helped by government welfare, NGOs, the alternative that we are providing. These people suffering in the religion are guilt tripped by believers to stay in there. They have to go through practices that actively harm them and harm their families. We think that that is terrible for them. We explain how the alternatives for the poor about government welfare, etc., are rather going to be more functional, more increased on our side, because one, poor are not silenced by these religions. They have incentive to pressurize the government to actually have welfare, to actually voice out. But also government and NGOs see how these people are suffering in that community. They don't rely on this alternative religion, which gives help at the condition of these people being binded by the religion for the rest of their life. And therefore, we think that such help is also a trade-off on their side. But going to the individual issues, we think that the benefit that Opp posits is not unique to organized religion. First of all, in terms of salvation or sense of purpose, it's very unclear why this can only be provided when this is an organized religion, when you're told by an authority, because SBNR individuals can be flexible. For example, I want to be good to go to heaven because I believe in the afterlife, but still I don't want to sacrifice my current happiness, so maybe I'll still go to nomikai, even though that might be considered as something that's alcohol might be something that's prohibited. But second of all, they said you can't go through the worst moments of your life. But you have family and friends who are likely to help you. You're likely to have coping mechanisms. They said you need an authority telling you how to feel. It's unclear why this authority is better than any other of these forces that are willing to help you. But third of all, in terms of community, just to say we have clubs, we have friends, family that care about you, which that ties to our points in our arguments. You are not tied to an arbitrary community that is determined by the birth lottery. You're not criticized when you don't fit in this community values. On our side, you can be flexible to choose those that actually support you. And therefore, we think that the benefits that they explain about organized religion is largely mitigated and can still be achieved on our side. What are the harms that we explain? We explain to you how these religions are largely exploitative. They are likely to guilt trip you. We give you mechanisms, so they can't just say that, well, that's not empirically true. We explain how there are strict rules, there are hierarchy that allows leader to hide the harmful things that they do. They said that right now there's liberalization, but if this were true, we think religions would just abolish all rules because you could just not have Ramadan because like fasting is painful, or you could just allow people to freely drink because more people love alcohol. They might like decide to come into this religion. We also explain how it's very speculative whether or not people are going to change their like calculus and get into the religion, and therefore this is not a like major practice that religion takes. They were able to give many like some examples, but that doesn't go to prove that all religions are more likely to liberalize. We give you mechanisms as to why they're more likely to be harmful. They said if this is that oppressive, people can't opt out. But first of all, they don't engage with the mechanism that comes from Haruki to say that you don't opt into the first place when you have SBNR, because you already have like a set of beliefs that you can follow, that you feel is valuable in the first place, and so you're not tricked by this random religious person that knocks on your door and say that you should get into this religion. But second of all, you're also able to feel doubt in the religion in the first place when you see on SNS these individuals that actually got out of the religion, like telling you that if is this scenario happening, like you should get out, etc. We think that the benefits stand on our side, and therefore we're proud to propose.
Thanks for coming to the slide. Now the meeting is over. It's better to let it stop.